All the misery and poverty I had seen on the road began to strike at the lives and happiness of the people I knew. I reacted by joining the intellectual groups that took the side of the unemployed, the dispossessed, and the disinherited. Herbert Kline. A mere 2 decades after the war to end all wars, a young documentarian named Herbert Kline ventured into Europe with the aim of documenting what he saw, making himself an adversary of not only fascists. He found himself taking stands against government censors in times of war and uneasy peace alike. Herbert Kline used the relatively new medium of film to document the growing chaos in Europe and at home with films such as Heart of Spain, Crisis, Lights Out in Europe, and The Forgotten Village. Kline documented the hardships of those who had been dispossessed and disinherited, focusing his lens on those affected by the war, taking a stand against a world which wanted nothing but. Herbert Kline was born in 1909 in Davenport, Iowa. He dropped out of school at the age of 14 and wandered about the northeast of America. He was 21 in 1929 when the Great Depression hit, and it had a profound effect on him. Kline became a social activist and member of the Socialist Party, using art as a means to deliver his message. This first work introduced Kline to the New Theater Movement, a congregation of socialists working in the theater scene of the time. As Kline became involved in the New Theater Movement, the first sparks of war came in Spain. Many left-wing activists from America in the New Theater Movement actively supported the Republicans, including Kline, who began working for a Republican radio station. In Paris, several weeks before Kline got to Madrid, the man met with a Hungarian photographer named Geza Karpati. The two met several times over dinner and formulated the idea to make a documentary film in Spain if they were to meet again. Later, Kline, now Madrid, was accosted late at night by Karpati, who had met with Dr. Norman Bethune, a Canadian doctor who is the head of the Loyalist Mobile Blood Transfusion Service. Dr. Bethune asked Karpati to make a film about the Loyalist Medical Service to raise money. Karpati tests Kline with writing a scenario for him to film. Kline's scenario involved a mother who donates blood to an injured soldier. Kline and Karpati focused on the day-to-day existence of the people affected by the war. This focus on the people affected by the disaster was a hallmark of Kline's work. He always sought to use film to create a genuine human connection between the subject and the audience. About a year later, Kline released Heart of Spain, which gained some notoriety as a pro-loyalist film with genuine emotional impact. Kline did not rest after making Heart of Spain. He focused his sights on the crisis occurring in Germany. As the Great War drew to a close, tensions rose between the army and the military leadership. This came to a head with the infamous Naval Order of 24 October 1918, where the German Naval Command ordered a decisive battle between their navy and the British Royal Navy. One the sailors saw as having no true purpose. The sailors led a mutiny at the port of Wilhelmshaven on the 29th. The soldiers who remained loyal were quickly overwhelmed. Revolution quickly spread across Germany, and by the 7th, the Kaiser had fled. The revolution had succeeded. On the 10th, a revolutionary council was elected, and an armistice was quickly signed as Berlin was seized by revolutionaries. Hitler rose to power in Germany, promising in Mein Kampf that he would take the territory that Germany lost in the Treaty of Versailles. Kline ventured into Czechoslovakia, the next target in Hitler's conquest. An incredibly dangerous move, as Kline himself was Jewish. Nevertheless, he went with his wife, Rosa, Kline disguised as a Nazi propaganda filmmaker, so that he would be able to get footage of Nazi rallies. In a later article on the film, he said, "It seems strange for one of my verboten and despised racial origin to have a troop of SA men to do my bidding and march and howl and shout as they were told." A reviewer from the New York Times stated on the subject of the film, "It is the study of a beleaguered democracy in the dark days after the Nazi Austrian putsch. A concise, complete, obviously authentic, and extraordinarily graphic record of a significant and tragic historical event." The Germans invaded Czechoslovakia, just as detailed in Mein Kampf. The next target was Danzig, and later, Poland. Kline traveled there, where he met Douglas Slocum, a newspaper photographer from Britain who saw what was coming in Poland just as Herbert Kline had. He was caught and arrested by the Nazis for filming the burning of a synagogue, and the two began filming Kline's next documentary, Lights Out in Europe. Another stand not only against fascism, but against the oncoming war and the doubtless millions it would kill.
We managed to get aboard a train with hundreds and hundreds of refugees. We suddenly heard the sound of German planes overhead. There were bombs falling around the train. Eventually, we managed to get out of Poland and head for Stockholm, and then from Stockholm to London and safety.
The film took a vehement stand against the war. In its denouement, Kline compared this new, burgeoning war to the Great War just 2 decades earlier, stating that these were men who might have given the world another Shakespeare, another Aristotle, good fathers, good sons, good husbands, men victims of a slaughter so hideous they could only fight it to believe it to be a war to end all wars. The film's anti-war stances were not welcomed by the US government, and all the reels of the film, save for one, were cut down, with some of their footage used for propaganda films and newsreels. As the war consumed Europe, Kline decided to change his focus far closer to home. When Kline arrived in the US, he began a correspondence with John Steinbeck in 1940, who was interested in writing a new documentary film for Kline to make. Set in a small Mexican village, and Steinbeck's notoriety gave it a significantly higher profile than Kline's previous works. The film centered around a small, isolated pueblo in the remote mountains of Mexico, far behind modern times. The film highlighted the conflicts between science and superstition, focusing on how they believed the government and the powerful kept people like this down, perpetuating their intense poverty and lack of education for economic benefit. The film was finished by 1941, and Kline began to organize his premiere at the Belmont Theater in Manhattan. However, as the date closed in, the Motion Picture Council for Brooklyn, which was, in actuality, the motion picture division of the New York State Board of Education, blocked the premiere, effectively censoring the film from public view. This censorship was due to 2 scenes from the film, which the council found objectionable, specifically scenes which showed a mother nursing her child and a scene of a mother giving birth. Although the council themselves commended the film for, quote, what strength it has, they expressed regret at the inclusion. Nonetheless, they felt it necessary to stop the premiere of the film due to the inclusion of these scenes. Once again, Kline's work brought to question the American ideals of the time, proposing an alternative perspective to the status quo. And it appeared that once again, his work would be censored. Unlike with Lights Out, which died with relatively little fanfare, Steinbeck's involvement gave the project a much higher profile, and newspapers rallied around the film, with articles from the New York Post chastising the censors, stating, quote, if the censors really believe that there is anything in the film which an adult New Yorker should not be permitted to see, then the censors should be removed and replaced by the quiz kids. News of this censorship echoed across the world. Word arrived to the Mexican ambassador to the United States, who sent a letter to the American ambassador stating, quote, I do not have praise enough for The Forgotten Village. Its technique, its tenderness, the well-balanced sequences, and every minute detail constitutes the work of well-known masters Steinbeck and Kline. I wish to take this opportunity to express to you, to Mr. Steinbeck, and to Mr. Kline, and to all of those who contributed to the artistic success of this film, my personal appreciation for their kind and very human subject. On the 1st of December, 1941, the State Board of Regents overruled the censor, allowing the film to be premiered without cuts. Finally, after his landmark documentary film had been struck down by the same forces that struck down Lights Out in Europe, Kline and Steinbeck were victorious against government censors, and The Forgotten Village remains a classic, although oft-forgotten, film. Kline ventured into places where humanity was at its worst. Yet, he focused not simply on the events themselves, but on all of those who were impacted by said events: mothers, soldiers, children. This is where Kline placed his lens, removing the barrier of thousands of miles and however many years to place the viewer in these situations, from Spain to Bohemia to Poland, to England, and to the remote pueblos of Mexico. Kline recorded these human stories. Although his messages were often ignored and outright banned by the United States government, he kept marching on, taking stand after stand for the benefit of the unemployed, the dispossessed, and the disinherited.